the brutality of approaching world affairs of Donald Trump, not mincing his words, so far has been one of words. And now, yesterday, we've seen for the first time the Trump administration using bombs on Yemen, of all places, and telling Yemen to cease attacks on shipping, which they haven't been doing for months. So, and we've got reports that about 30 people died, most of them civilians. It's unclear yet what exactly is happening, but this is the first time the Trump administration uses bombs, actual bombs, um, and it's using them against one of the poorest country on the planet. How do you make sense of this one?
Well, it's part of the Israel exception to everything. I mean, the United States has been complicit in genocide in Gaza. It is complicit in the ethnic cleansing that's now intensified in the West Bank. It was complicit in the invasion of Lebanon. It has been complicit in the Israeli refusal to honor the ceasefire and withdraw from Lebanon. Israel is occupying 5 bases in Lebanon, which it says it intends to keep. We have been complicit in the seizure of Syrian territory. We were complicit in the total disarmament from the air of Syria right after the fall of the Assad regime. We have been, I think, however, somewhat more responsible on the question of attacking Iran. I guess, given the Israel exception, the power of the Zionist lobby in the United States and the extent to which Mr. Trump is beholden to Zionist donors and may have made commitments in return for campaign donations, I think we should be looking at the attack on Yemen as, saying at least it isn't Iran. People say, well, the Iran-backed Houthis. Well, the fact that the Houthis have Iranian support has absolutely nothing to do with their program. And they actually, in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, in the world at large, are seen as serious people who have been willing to take risks and suffer casualties, put their lives where their mouths are in support of Palestine. And as you said, when there was a ceasefire, supposed ceasefire, agreed between Hamas and Israel under the auspices of the United States, the Houthis, who are basically the de facto government in most of Yemen, called off. They're always called rebels, but they've been in power. They fulfill all of the normal requirements for recognition as a state. They called off their blockade of the Red Sea from land. That is, they have apparently developed some new weaponry with which to intensify that blockade and strike Israel. But I think this is an exception to Mr. Trump's general posture, except in one sense. He's been quite prepared to bomb Somalia or Yemen and other places that can't fight back, apparently. I think this is a very dangerous game because if you bomb people and they don't have an air force with which to respond, 9/11 should have taught us that they will find some other way to respond. So this is all an invitation to an expansion of terrorism, a return, if you will, to the 1960s, when the Palestine issue became the cause of terrorist actions internationally. I think we're risking that now because there is apparently no path to peace.
The How do you think the rest of the world will react to this? I mean, so far, in my view, the Trump administration has been trying to mend fences, especially with Russia, obviously, right? And in my view, or from what I hear, China also received this rather positively as a positive sign. But this now, Yemen and the West Asia are sending the opposite signal, as in, as you said, if you're weak, then we'll be bombed. That is, of course, a signal that to China means, well, okay, nothing has changed, and we are still very much under threat, especially also looking at the rhetoric coming out of the White House toward China.
Well, I'm not sure about that in the case of China, but I'll return to that in a moment. But I think both Moscow and Beijing have a very good sense of the difference between strategic issues and tactical ones, or primary issues and secondary issues. This is an unfortunate secondary issue for them. And you saw this with the Russian failure to support the Assad government in Syria. The Russians are very clear that although they do have interests at stake in Syria, and they are trying to work out a relationship with Mr. al-Shara, the new president in Syria, the self-appointed president, um, in part because they don't want Syria to become a haven for jihadis. 15% of the Russian population is Muslim, and they've had terrible problems with the Chechens, Dagestanis, and others, and they don't want Syria to emerge as a haven, a springboard for this kind of activity. The Chinese have somewhat the same issue with Syria because of the large presence of Uyghurs in the ranks of the terrorist groups that now control Syria. And this isn't a joke, as we have seen in the Latakia area with massacre, a large-scale massacre of Alawites, revenge killings by the Sunni extremists, the so-called liberal democratic jihadis turned out to be not quite as liberal and democratic as some would prefer. Anyway, anyway, I would note that in the case of Yemen, Chinese ships are not hit because China does not support Israel. The only ships that are hit are those that are supporting Israel, not just Israeli ships, the Zim line and so forth, but American and British warships who've been engaged in trying to counter the Yemeni blockade and any cargo headed for Israel. This basically shut down the port of Eilat and at the head of the Gulf of Aqaba, and has really been quite successful as a blockade. So it has not been successfully countered by the U.S. Navy. And I'm not sure that what Mr. Trump has done is going to counter it effectively. So it's probably a gesture of support for Israel. It's seen as such by Moscow and Beijing. They don't want to get involved in the Arab-Israeli issue any more than they have to, especially the Chinese. So this is disgusting. It's terrible. It's it's contrary. There's no declaration of war. There's no congressional approval. From a constitutional point of view, it is a travesty. Under international law, it's also a problem. But I don't think the broader implications are as great as your question suggested.